me when we talk about friendships. Really recognise and acknowledge and accept all of these kinds of relationships all the way.
What happens to us in our very early years in some way forms us, and we have to grow with it, and because it's become part of who we are and it's become part of our bones. I've always thought that we're not like caterpillars. We don't go through some metamorphosis, and we don't shed childhood and become something else. And it's often talked about like that, as if there's a division between our childhood selves and our adult selves. And I don't think that's right. I think we are much more like trees, and the things that happen to us when we're first growing will affect, your roots. They might scar you, injure you, but you keep growing and you absorb those injuries. And that's why I think childhood, it's a very, very important time. I think being aware of the way children think and respond to things, and noticing things, and realising that they will feel anxiety and stress and worry and those things, as well as great joy. And to feel you can just constantly protect is a sort of nonsense, because that's just not possible with anybody. It's better to address things and talk about things, and that's why I think children's literature is so important. Good children's literature, good children's art, illustration, theatre, cinema, music, etc. But also to remember that children can also respond to the art that you respond to as an adult, just as I loved going to galleries with my father and I could respond to all of these artists. It doesn't mean just because you're a child that you have to have something very, very particular for you, but that it is also important to have things that's creative for you as well. Children's literature serves a very important purpose.
So I think your empathy should extend all the way.
I don't think you should have one person who's your best friend and that's it, and they're your best one.
I'm often turning the radio on just to check what the time is, because I'm meant to be doing something or taking my daughter to school, and I'll click it on, and I happened to put it on just as they introduced this little piece about quantum mechanics, and it's not something I would naturally think, I'm going to really listen to that. That sounds like my cup of tea. It was just because it was the way this person was talking about it. He's called Carlo Rovelli, and he was talking about this idea that nothing exists on its own. We're not single entities. We all relate one to another, so we're related things. The thing about that is I've been thinking like this for a long time. Why is it I cannot work on my own? More and more I feel alienated from the world around me. And it's not just to do with what's been happening immediately. It's been going that way. It's the not sitting down in the same room and looking at things. Somebody casually saying something that will change the entire direction of what I'm doing. And I like that, how somebody might notice something on my wall and say, that's really beautiful, or I like the way you've put those two things together, and you think, I wasn't really thinking of doing anything with that, but now maybe I will. And all of that, I think, brings about a creative energy, changes something for me. It shifts things, and it's the movement. And I think creativity and creative thought is about movement. And so hearing this man saying this really important thing about the universe, but making it also about the human scale of things, how important it is for us. And I think he even uses the word that it's reassuring. I think he says that. But that's how I took it. And I thought, that's it.
things don't have properties by themselves, they have properties related to something else. Not to human observers or to conscious or anything like that. And I find this marvelous, because I think I am a relation, I'm not an entity.
Carol Howlett called me back in October 2019 to say that Quentin Blake had given these beautiful drawings to the Foundling Museum, and she wanted to create a show around them and wondered if I would be interested in curating that. And when we were looking at the drawings, a lot of them seemed to be about fear and, I guess to me, anxiety and feeling sort of defended. And I think because of how I was feeling about a lot of things and the thinking I'd been doing about children and their anxieties that we often don't realise are anxieties because children don't share everything. They often hold things very close to them. We'd thought about doing a show called Nothing to Worry About, which would be about these sort of closely held fears. And then the pandemic came along and it seemed not the right show to do because anxiety was everywhere and it was very much out in the open. We felt there was something more interesting that we could do then with these beautiful pictures. And out of it sort of came another whole train of thought, which was really to do with how one art form brings about another. I'd been thinking about this because children often ask me, as do adults, where do you get your ideas from? As if it's something terribly complicated that they don't have, and this sort of divide between the creative person and the non-creative person, and you might become a creative person and you might not. And I just wanted to sort of dispel that idea as much as I could, because children's thoughts and reasoning and the meanings they find in the things around them are very powerful, very important. And in fact, anyone who considers themselves not creative, their thought process, the things they read into things, the ideas they have are just as powerful. It's just that it may not come out as a work of art or a piece of music or a piece of theatre, but it doesn't mean it's not a really powerful idea. So when I was coming up with projects for my term as Children's Laureate, one of the things that I was really, really moved by was the Betjeman Young Poets. And there was, until very recently, this wonderful poetry prize set up by the Betjeman estate and encouraging really quite young children, I think between 10 and 13, to write poems. And the things that came out of that were just astonishing, really. I was really moved, and I was lucky enough to be a judge on it. And we selected about 12 poems. We then invited young illustrators, so young graduates really, to illustrate these poems, because I really like that, the idea that you can invite really young people to write pieces of poetry, and then invite another generation to come in and illustrate their work and show the meaning of it, the importance of it, rather than just say it's children's poetry. And I thought having that sort of way of showing how everything influences another is such an important thing for children to know, and for any of us to know, because I don't create my work in a vacuum. I may have learnt how to respond to it, so I've learnt how to find my way of doing it and the tools I use. It doesn't mean my way is better. I suppose that I really wanted to just sort of say that I'm just practiced at it, as Quentin is incredibly skilled because he's been doing his work for so many years. But then I look at these young illustrators just starting out and I think, my goodness, I would be so proud to have done that work.
This poem was written on the back of a napkin in a diner as greasy as the stringy strands on the waitress's head, as the wrinkled stools yawn their silvery mouths and the aching lights shut their eyes, she crinkles out a back so weary from holding debt. The small girl can't help but exclaim, "It'll be okay," into the crippled ears of an off-white page.
So when we were rethinking the show, and it's been through so many incarnations because of what we've been facing this last 2 years, one of the things that we thought would be really interesting to do would be to get poets from different generations to respond to Quentin's drawings, and so you're sort of doing the idea in reverse. And one of the poets we invited was Sarah Adegute, who had been one of our Betchman young poets. We've got Jackie Kay and Michael Rosen, who's been writing for a very long time and has worked with Quentin before, and many other poets as well. It's just such a beautiful collection. What's interesting to me is that Quentin's work has always been in my life. I just knew it as a young child, and I responded to it. I guess it just made me feel very safe. Whenever I saw a book jacket with his drawing on, I recognised that. I was less aware of, who he was, obviously, early on. But it didn't matter because it's the drawing I'm responding to, not the name. But it's his language. We've commissioned a musician to respond to one of the poems that's responded to Quentin. So certainly for me, if I'm writing and I get perhaps stuck, I might listen to music that really helps me think my way into the story or the character. Somehow music really moves me on and takes me somewhere else, because I think music is extraordinary in the way it can transport you. I thought it was a way of really showing how one thing makes another, or how one artist can respond to a completely different artist, completely different discipline, and that we're not all just stuck in our boxes. And I always talk about the fact that cinema and artists like Matisse probably biggest influence on my work. And then, of course, there are lots and lots of other things, and there's just walking down a street that influences my work, and listening to children playing and just those voices, which is quite musical, and that sound, snippets of conversation, anything, just that way that one thing makes another, which, that also takes me right back to the Carlo Rovelli piece.
Again and again we went out, we packed our bags